How I almost lost my perfect husband of 20 years due to a need for attention and validation from another man. I met my husband in 1999. I was 19. He was 24. It was at a summer camp his mother was running, and we both were camp counselors. It was lust at first sight. The moment I laid eyes on him, I knew it would eventually and rather quickly turn to love. But here was this bear of a young man. 6'4", 228 pounds, rock-solid physique, chiseled square jaw, played fullback in high school and college. He was the most gorgeous being I'd ever laid eyes on. We started dating not even a month after the camp ended, and by 2001, we were married. For the next nearly 2 decades, he did everything and gave me everything I could ever want. My husband has been the definition of provider and protector. He gave me a life where if I wanted to quit my job and be a stay-at-home mom for our 3 children, I could do so and we'd never miss a step. My income is supplemental at best. I make a good amount, but my husband's take-home dwarfs my own. So how the hell, or more importantly, why the hell did I cheat on him for 9 months? Selfishness. Plain and simple. He's the only man I'd ever been intimate with up until my affair. Sure, he showed me plenty of affection and our sex life was awesome, but I never had my crazy 20s. I felt like he showed me love and affection because he had to be being my husband. We live in a decent-sized town in South Carolina, but generally everyone knows someone who knows the next person. You get the idea. So the vast majority of people knew that I was O's wife. So I never got the dreaded award. Attention. That's where M came into the picture. M worked for my company, but one of the Northeast offices. My company was doing an aggressive expansion in the South region, and he was moved to my office around June of 2019. His main task was to facilitate transitional expansion and train who was ultimately going to be his position in the region. Me. M was the polar opposite of my husband. My husband is a big, rugged outdoorsman. He powerlifts, is covered in tattoos, has long hair and a big bushy beard, but is soft-spoken. Not introverted, but not boastful. He's a pious, humble man. M is slender, dresses in designer names, drove an Audi RS5, and was very outspoken and headstrong. He also had a silver tongue, and I admit I fell for it. Naturally, we worked quite closely, and M would pay me all kinds of compliments. It started out work-related, but evolved to subtle compliments of my appearance, and I lapped the attention up. I was smitten by him. He wrapped his tendrils around me, and I was too foolish to resist him. I confided in him. I began returning his affection because I was hooked on the idea of this clean-cut, pretty boy showering me with adoration. I had it justified in my mind that I wanted to experience this because it was new and exciting. In hindsight, it was the dumbest reasoning I've ever imagined. By August, it was a full-blown emotional affair, and Halloween of 2019 is where it became physical. At the company Halloween party, I went with a few of my friends. Normally, O would come, but he was just 3 months removed of neck surgery and in no condition to party. So he told me to go on and have a good time. M and I met up at the tail end of the party and ended up back at his place. I was fully aware of what was going to happen, and I went ahead with it, thinking only of myself and my own needs. I justified it in my head by saying, "This is my experience." My husband began to suspect things on Thanksgiving Day. At this point, the fog had completely engulfed me, and I was in contact with him as many times as I could. I'd started to pull away from my husband between October to then, especially since there hadn't been months since we'd been intimate. His surgery considerably hindered his movement. I had stepped outside on my parents' porch, and he followed me outside saying, "Whoever it is, tell them you're with your family." He'd gotten pretty annoyed with how much I was checking my phone and sending texts, and I'd lied to him telling him it was one of the younger girls on my team who'd recently broken up with her boyfriend and was going to be alone for the holidays. He presses me over his issue with it on the way home, and after we put the kids to bed, I snapped at him. So now, for the first time really in our entire marriage, there was a hint of resentment between us. And in hindsight, I'm disgusted with how I treated him. I must have been out of my freaking mind. Fast forward to May 2020, where everything went south. I was now working remotely due to COVID, and my husband was now back working, having been cleared by his doctor in March. Due to the fact that a lot of the guys at his work were furloughed, he had to pull 10 to 12-hour days sometimes, for days a week. The kids would do their homeschooling, then either go to their friend's house one street down or to my husband's parents' house. They're very close to their grandparents, both mine and O's. This would give me several hours in the house alone, and you guessed it, I invited him over. Happened several times over the spring. But that one day in late May is one I dread and will never soon forget. I never heard his truck pull up, never heard him enter the house or come up the stairs. O is a mountain of a man, so normally you know exactly where he is in the house by the sound of his footsteps. M and I were right smack in the middle of it when I noticed O standing in the doorway with his phone out. It's the single darkest, most embarrassing moment of my life. Even recalling it now makes me sick to my stomach and teary-eyed. I pushed him off of me and just stared at O. The only words that I could even muster out of my dumb mouth was, "I can explain." Cliché, right? O laughs at me maniacally and dresses me down before telling me to pack up your crap and get the F out of my house. He said it with such ferocity and finality that I knew there was no coming back. I've never heard that level of fury in his voice the 21 years I've known this man. He leaves and closes the door behind him, and the weight of what just happened flattens me. All I could do was fall to my knees and scream, and then starts yelling at me also. I really couldn't tell you what he said if I had tried. I was in a state of shock. He's screaming at me the whole time while I'm trying to gather whatever stuff I'd need in the immediate. M had put his stuff on and was adamant about not wanting to leave the bedroom alone because he was afraid my husband would cave in his skull. Remember, O is about 2 times the size of M. I open the door and M scurries out like a scared rodent. I try to approach O and he sternly says, "Don't you effing dare." Those words are burned into my mind. The pure rage in his eyes absolutely shook me to my core. I just wiped my face, picked up my bag and left. I looked around the house as I left thinking this was the last time I'd ever see it as it's his house. An inheritance from his grandfather who owned the land and built the house literally with his bare hands. By the time I reached the doorway, M was gone and the keys to my car were back in the house. I was no longer welcomed in. I've never felt more alone than that moment. I couldn't call my sisters or my parents as he grew up in a super southern conservative home. They'd completely disown me if they knew what I'd done, especially since they absolutely adored O. I have no brothers, so O was like the son my father never had. He'd especially be hurt by it. The only person I could call was my best friend Rin, who I've known since grade school. I called and explained to her everything. She offered to come pick me up, but I told her no. I'd find my own way to her place. The next 2 days were agonizing. I tried calling and texting O every chance I could between crying and getting dressed down by Rin for being a totally FF up. I tried calling his parents, but his father told me, "The kids are going to stay here a few days. You need to give O space. He'll reach out to you when he's ready," before hanging up on me. So that Minnow had told his parents what happened. I began to resign myself to the fact that I was about to become an ex-wife. There's no way I could come back from this. I just ruined a 20-year marriage and broke the heart of the only man I've ever loved because I needed to have a fling. But then D-Day +3, he finally answered me and told me I could come home. Rin drove me back, and upon going inside we sit on the couch. Rin's right beside me as O tears me a new one. In 21 years, he's never so much as raised his voice at me, and here he was shouting at me for a good 40 minutes it felt. He asked me why I did what I did and I answered him honestly. I didn't gaslight or lie. I effed up. I owned it. I'm not ashamed to say I begged on my knees for him not to leave me. He tells me after all of it, he's not going to file for divorce. But things are about to change, and not for the better for me. It appears he'd spent the days apart from me devising terms of reconciliation, which included me resigning from my job, cutting all contact from him, giving all of M's contact info so he could monitor if M tries to contact me himself, and signing a post-op later in the week. There was another stipulation he made that I won't mention because I don't want anyone to think he's a horrible person. He's not. I deserved all I brought upon myself for breaking my vows to him. I accepted his terms willingly. 2 days later, we met with the family lawyer he had contacted and I signed the post-op. No lawyer of my own because I wasn't contesting what I did. It's been 7 months since and I do everything and anything I can to try and ease his hurt. And he is hurting. We're doing couples counseling and I see a therapist 2 times a week to deal with my own feeling and come to terms with what I did. He puts on a brave face in front of everyone as the only people who know are us, Rin, his parents and Em. But it tears me to shreds seeing how much I wounded him. He was always a jovial, warm-hearted person. It's hard to find that warmth anymore. He tries. He really does. But I broke his spirit with what I did, and I'm ashamed of myself for it. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror to the point where I cut my hair and dyed it dark brown. I'm naturally strawberry blonde because I couldn't stand what stared back at me. I don't try to smother him. I give him space. I watch. If he asks something of me, I do it willingly and with no questions asked. The most jarring aspect of all this, aside from the stipulation I don't want to mention, is the fact that he addresses me by my first name. For 20 years, I've been Baby Doll. Now I'm just B. That hurts in a way I didn't even anticipate it would. But I accept it. I deserve it. And if I want to earn my title of Baby Doll back, I have to build back his trust in me and restore his manhood. I have to be better than what I was before. He's afforded me a second chance I rightly don't deserve, and I refuse to take it or him for granted. Never again will I stray. Never again will I give him reasons to lose faith in me. I love my husband to the core of my being, and I will do anything I can within my God-given ability to show him that. Today is our 20th anniversary. This morning while we were eating breakfast with the kids, he kissed me on the lips for the first time since D-Day and said, "Happy New Year." My heart melted and I had to excuse myself from the table to go into the guest bathroom and cry. I've never been more overcome with emotion at once in my life. Happiness, sadness, shame, regret. I think I had an anxiety attack, to be honest. A few minutes later, he comes into the bathroom and I just run into his arms. I squeeze him as hard as my tiny self can around his waist, bury my face in his chest, and ugly cry another 10 minutes. He just stands there, his arms wrapped around me and hold me. I truly don't deserve this man. The beautiful, kind, warm-hearted, spirited, and just man. Even with how badly I hurt him, he takes care of me. I will never jeopardize losing him ever again. Here's a few edits. Suffice to say, I was not expecting this to get this level of attention. Wow. I'd like to make some clarifications that seem to have popped up in the comments. First, my husband has shared his side of the story on Reddit a while ago, and the story was picked up by a YouTuber and featured on his channel. If there are inconsistencies between his account and things of mine, it's because he chose to leave core details out, no doubt protecting me. Whereas I've chosen to be completely forthcoming with my account aside from omitting the stipulation and not giving a number to how many times I'd been intimate with M. My husband knows the number. I chose not to mention it because it's a trigger. Second, since the cat of the stipulation is out of the bag and my husband has read the post, as I mentioned before, he floats around these subs himself. He's given me permission to say since he did mention it in his post when he made it. The stipulation in question is that he'd get to have intimate intercourse with other women, and I would never know who any of those women were. He did, however, tell me he had relations with 4 women, and one of them is someone we both know. I have no idea who it is, and I don't ever want to know. He did this between the months of June to October. I think he stopped in October. I'm not 100% sure. Third, one user suggested I should get my own lawyer and resign the post-nup. I don't have that right. This isn't about protecting myself. This is about trying to heal my husband and fix my broken marriage. I'm 100% fine with the post-nup agreement presented to me and plan to adhere to it till my dying day. Alright, let's see some top comments. ManPride02 says, cheating is bad, but the marital bed in his home is just beneath lying about paternity. You still could be an ex-wife because this is far from over. My cousin divorced his cheating wife 3 years after the fact. He did everything he could to try and hold it together, but he just couldn't. He told me something happened in him when he caught her cheating. The love just drained out of him, and he couldn't get it back. I myself have gone through this, and it is hard. Ultimately, I chose not to stay in the relationship. Did you ever consider a backup plan in case that happens? The OP comes back with, I have, and the idea that he could at any time decide, F it, I'm done, never leaves my mind. All I can do is try to rebuild him and show him he's loved and that I am eternally remorseful I broke his heart. Ultimately, it's his choice if he keeps me or sends me packing. I resigned myself to that fact a long time ago. 504mex said, such a sad story. The way you're portraying him, any stipulation or demand he asked in order to move forward is well-deserved. Hope you find the strength to follow through. Best wishes. Go, go, go. 9 of greed. True, but the problem isn't even a question of whether or not the husband is a bad person for demanding what he can infer to be a punitive stipulation. People are human, and our instincts to punish bad behavior are generally correct ones. But that's not the issue. The real problem is that this probably isn't a road to what necessitates a return to happy marriage. People in O's situation always think that a gauntlet of punitive measures and their significant others' performative acts of self-flagellation like Opie's taunter will pave the way to a return to their pre-compromised relationship. But it very rarely does. A more apt metaphor for it would be like scratching an infected wound. The only possible roadblock is forgiveness from the wronged party. And it's a difficult one not just for obvious reasons, but also because it seems incredibly wrong-headed and downright offensive for the onus to be placed on the wrong party to be the one to take action and compromise. After all, she's the one who cheated. Why should it be all on him to forgive her? What's clear from this post is that Opie is definitely not a mind reader. She thinks she's on the path out of the woods, when it's much more likely that she's just being led in a circle because it hurts O not to be around her. The problem is it also hurts O to be around her. Living with your cheating significant other can be the closest thing to psychological self-harm a person will ever experience. Thus, unbeknownst to her, they're in a holding pattern until he figures out what to do. Things could go either way, of course. Miracles do happen. But walking in on your wife in a cinematic height of her betrayal is a special kind of faces of death video that will probably be seared into this guy's mind well into his 80s. Opie replied back, "I'm committed to doing and being whatever he needs me to be. I'll win back his trust or I'll die trying." Go, go, go. 9 retorts. So this is something that's a bit critical to understand. Just as he was, as you described, the perfect husband, and yet you strayed away. You can now be the perfect wife, or as close as a person can be at this point, and your marriage might still fail. The critical point being, as you taught him so well, that a person can do everything right in their lives and still lose. We actually control very little of the outcomes of our lives. This is why trust is so highly regarded, because it's one of the ways in which we can majorly influence how things turn out for us. The Opie still wants to believe. Whatever the outcome and consequences are, I'm prepared to face them. Even if 10 years turn out, he all of a sudden decides he can't stand being with me anymore. I'm prepared for it. I'm not kidding myself that things will go as I hope they will. I can only do what I can to influence them in that direction. The final decision is his to make, and whatever choice that is, I'll accept it willingly and with no resistance. And finally, a quote from Lump But Cat. Reminds me of this shirt I had once. By far the best shirt I ever owned. Fit perfect, never out of style, compliments all the time. Then it got this awful stain on it. Tried and tried to remove it. Nothing worked. Tried everything. YouTube, blogs, various products. Nothing worked. Just couldn't part with it. So I kept it. Couldn't wear it. So I guess a lot of sentimental value. Memories. Eventually, I realized it had no real value to me anymore. Looking at it kind of made me sad anyway. Finally discarded it after a few years. Point here is you will need to work harder than ever, forever, to sustain and create value from your husband in your relationship. As in my metaphor, you have stained the marriage. Something both of you will carry for your lives.